The Dionysiac religion contained originally orgiastic rites that implied the need for an initiate to abandon themselves to their animal nature and thereby experience the full fertilizing power of the Earth Mother. The initiating agent for this rite of passage in the Dionysiac ritual was wine. It was supposed to produce the symbolic lowering of consciousness necessary to introduce the novice into the closely guarded secrets of nature, whose essence was expressed by a symbol of erotic fulfillment. The god Dionysus joined with Ariadne, his consort, in a sacred marriage ceremony after his hero's journey. Dionysus also being Persephone's son, and Dionysus being a god from ancient Greek mythology, and he is commonly associated with wine, festivity, and ecstasy. However, he is also considered a vegetation deity, which means that he is associated with the growth and flourishing of plants and crops. And in this aspect, Dionysus is often depicted as a young man with a wreath of ivy or grape leaves on his head, holding a thyrsus, a staff wrapped with ivy or vine leaves and topped with a pine cone. His symbols include grapes, wine, and other plants that are used to make alcohol. The connection between Dionysus and vegetation stems from his association with the cycle of life and death. And in Greek mythology, Dionysus was born twice, first from the womb of his mother Semele, and then from the thigh of Zeus, his father. And this dual birth symbolizes the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, which is reflected in the annual cycle of plant growth and decay. Dionysus was believed to have the power to bring life and fertility to the land, and his cult was associated with the agricultural cycle and was often accompanied by rituals and celebrations that involved the planting and harvesting of crops. And these rituals were believed to ensure the success of the crops and the fertility of the land. As vegetation deity, Dionysus originally can be linked back to a vegetation deity, much like Attis, linking him back to the mysteries of the Great Mother. Next to his association with the bull, which was also one of his symbols. Yet if we now bring to mind the Phrygian trio of Artemis, Dionysus, and Apollo, we could, in that sense, have the combination in the archaic sense of the mistress of the beast, the bull, and Trito with his Corios. Dionysus was also often depicted as bull-horned. In the Orphic hymn to the god of the Triennial Feast, the hymn says, "I call upon you, blessed and wildly named Bacchus, the bull-horned redeemer of Nysa, god of the winepress, conceived in fire." And other hymns describe him as bull-faced, where within the Dionysian rites his rituals connected to the sacred bull reenacted the creation of the cosmos and humanity by offering a bull as a sacrificial symbol, which echoes the Trito myth. And this act was in his mysteries seen as a divine dismemberment of the god himself, where Dionysus' flesh and blood, consumed by his worshippers, symbolized the god infusing his very presence into his followers' bodies, imparting a portion of his divinity, echoing the dismemberment of Yemu from Proto-Indo-European myth. And in the realm of Orphic myth, 7 titans attempted to dismember the infant god. And to evade them, in some versions of the myths, Dionysus underwent a series of shape-shifting transformations with the final form of a young bull. One might thus wonder if Dionysus might actually, in an archaic sense, represent the cattle that was to be rescued, which symbolically, later within the mysteries, became the symbol of the most sacred to be obtained. Or if he, through his connection to Zagreus and the underworld, might be connected to Yemu. And within the Vedic tradition, Yama is the Hindu god of death and justice, responsible for the dispensation of law and punishment of sinners. And his dogs are meant to track down those who are about to die, and guard the path to Yama's realm, the underworld. And he also has been linked to Greek Hades, who is the king of the underworld, best known for his dog Cerberus, and both Yama and Zagreus also being the son of the thunder god, where Dionysius Zagreus is also identified with Hades himself. As such, Yama, Hades, and Zagreus could be plausibly mythological counterparts to Yemu, representing the underworld, death, and the mysteries of life and rebirth. And as much as Dionysus descends into the underworld, his mother Persephone also does so as well, and she is linked to the Eleusinian Mysteries, who in turn were a series of ancient Greek religious ceremonies held in honor of the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone. And these ceremonies were held annually in the city of Ulysses, located in Attica, Greece. And they were considered to be the most important religious event in ancient Greece and were celebrated for over 2,000 years. The exact origins of the Lesser Mysteries are unclear, but they were believed to have been established in the Mycenaean period, around 2000 to 1500 BCE, from the earlier Cybele cult, with later influence from Egypt through the cult of Isis, linked to the death of her husband Osiris. And within a later section about Orphism within this book, and also really then later in the series, we will go deeper into their myths connected to Dionysus. Yet, now coming back to the Eleusinian Mysteries, well, the later Greek Eleusinian ceremonies involved a series of rituals, including fasting, purification, and the consumption of a sacred drink called kykeon. The ceremonies also included a procession from Athens to Ulysses and the reenactment of the story of Demeter and Persephone's abduction by Hades. And it's worth noting that the Eleusinian Mysteries were not open to everyone. Only people who had the Greek citizenship and were free of blood guilt, so murder, could participate in the initiation. Next to this, another thing of note is that the mystery tradition was eventually suppressed by the Roman Empire in 396 AD. Yet now coming back to the mysteries, well, they commenced with the solemn march of the Mysti, initiates, from Athens to Ulysses, as I had said. And the subsequent rites unfolded in the Telesthrion, or Hall of Initiation. And the initiation process for neophytes occurred in stages, and the annual cycle began with purification rites known as the Lesser Mysteries. And these were conducted at Agrea, on the stream of Ilissos, located outside Athens, during the month of Anestherion, so February to March. And notably, both men and women were allowed to participate in the Lesser Mysteries. And the purpose of these Lesser Mysteries was to prepare the initiates for the subsequent Greater Mysteries, scheduled for the month of Boudromion, September to October. And the Lesser Mysteries encompass a series of rituals and ceremonies designed to purify the initiates, setting the stage for their participation in the profound and transformative experiences of the Greater Mysteries. And it is these Greater Mysteries that were considered to be the most important and sacred part of the Eleusinian Mysteries. And those were open only to initiates who had undergone the Lesser Mysteries and were considered to be pure and morally upright. And these mysteries were believed to provide initiates with a deeper understanding of the divine and the afterlife, and were thought to give them the ability to communicate with the gods and the dead. And the Eleusinian Mysteries had two stages of initiation, the first being called teletke, or termination, which symbolized the end of an imperfect and incomplete period of life and the start of purification. The initiate was then referred to as a mista, meaning veiled or liberated person, where the second stage, the Greater Mysteries, provided further instruction and discipline, leading the initiate to be known as an epopta, or seer. They then were believed to have attained the ultimate understanding of the principles of life. And it means one who knows the interior wisdom. And now on the screen you can see the little that we know regarding what happened during the initiations. It is said that on the first day, the basileus has 3 assistants: the torchbearer, the kerux or crier, and the minister at the altar inside of a cave. For on the second day, purification would take place, where the phrase "to the sea, initiated ones" was also uttered, where they become veiled, where on the third day they would make sacrifices to Demeter. Then there's a procession of items, food items, flowers, and serpents. Next, torchlight processions, where on the sixth day the statue of Yahus, Dionysus, basically the son of Zeus and Demeter, was brought from Athens. The image was brought through the sacred gate, along the sacred way, halting by the sacred fig tree. Where on the seventh day heroic games would take place, where the winner got a gift from Demeter. And finally, on the eighth day, Asclepius, holding a snake on a staff, would heal people in their sleep. And the processions, sacrifices, and games are symbolic representations of various archetypal themes and desires. For example, the purification ritual and the sacrifices to Demeter represent a desire for spiritual and physical renewal and purification. The procession of items, including food, flowers, and a serpent, symbolizes the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Or the torchlight procession represents the search for illumination and guidance, while the games symbolize a desire for triumph and victory. And the statue of Dionysus represents the rebirth of the self, where finally the presence of Asclepius, the divine physician, demonstrates a belief in the healing power of the divine, and the snake on his staff symbolizes the connection between physical and spiritual healing. And what is further known is that there are 5 stages to the oral initiation, the first of which is the purification rituals. But after purification, the reception of the sacred rites succeeds, where the third part is when they are denominated epopteia or seer, and the fourth, which is the revelation. What is said to be produced from all of these is friendship and interior communion with the divine and the enjoyment of intimate converse with divine beings, which is the 5th and final stage. The revelation itself, from what we know, can be best described through the below excerpt from Thomas Taylor's work on the Eleusinian Mysteries. But first, for here, we must do nothing rashly. First, we must wash in this holy water. For it is with pure hands and a pure heart that we are bidden to enter the most sacred enclosure. Then, led into the presence of the Hierophant, he reads to us from a book of stone things which we must not divulge on pain of death. The Hierophant, who was always an old man, through symbols reveals the pure fields of Elysium and the chorus of the blessed. Demeter, through her own science and light, confirms the experience. The Hierophant then turns into the creator and the revealer of all things, with the sun as his torchbearer, the moon as his altar attendant, and Hermes as his herald. The final stage, which is the culmination of all the previous stages, is the establishment of a deep connection with the self and the divine, leading to a sense of friendship and communion with the sacred. And this stage represents the integration of the various parts of the psyche and the achievement of wholeness. The sun here symbolizes consciousness and enlightenment, while the moon represents the unconscious. Hermes, as a messenger, can be seen as a mediator between the conscious and unconscious realms, and in some sense, the Hierophant, in this sense, is revealed as the self. Hermes, as a trickster figure, being both an animus figure and also connected symbolically to the self, through his dual nature, linked to both snakes and birds. And in that sense, the revelation shows the union of opposites, where all symbols and opposites come together in the one, or in Jungian terms, the self. And the symbolic performances of the Lesser Mysteries were, as Thomas Taylor points out, aimed to depict the state of the soul while under the unconscious control of instinct, where there has not yet been a relationship established with it, and the descent of figures such as Hercules and Ulysses into the underworld and their prompt return from its murky depths were thus intended to represent this liberation from it through the facing and integrating of instinct. And another important myth connected to this for the Eleusinian Mysteries and also the Orphic Mysteries is the myth of Persephone, which from a Jungian lens is a myth about the journey of individuation, where there is a confrontation with the shadow, and also an animus figure being involved in the form of Hermes. And if you want to know more about that myth, I recommend my video on the Orphic myth of Persephone. That should now pop up. Yet what is now the interesting thing is that Plato's use of allegory and his emphasis on the hidden nature of reality may have been influenced by his exposure to these mystery school teachings, as Plato was initiated into the Eleusinian Mysteries after all. However, it's also important to know that Plato developed his own unique philosophy and worldview based on his own understanding. However, the meaning changes if we take the original mystery school teachings into account from which he borrowed this, which also include Plato's cave. And in Plato's cave allegory, the shadows are the only reality known to the prisoners. From a Jungian lens, these shadows can be seen as psychological projections. The prisoners only see what their minds allow them to see, based on their past experiences, beliefs, and attitudes. And these projections create a kind of distorted reality, just like the shadows on the cave wall. And the figures carrying symbols can be interpreted as archetypal images, which are universal patterns of behavior, thought, and emotion that are present in the collective unconscious. Next to unconscious projections of contents of the shadow through complexes, both personal and collective, that carry their own archetypal images and symbols, being emotionally charged. And in the allegory, the figures represent the ideas and concepts that shape the prisoner's understanding of the world. They are the source of the projections that create the shadows on the cave wall, where the fire in Plato's allegory can be seen as instinct, which is the biological and psychological programming that shapes our behavior and emotions. It is the raw primal energy that fuels our actions and reactions. Where finally the sun in the allegory can be interpreted as the Jungian self, which is the center of the psyche and the source of wholeness and integration. And the sun represents the ultimate reality that lies beyond the shadows on the cave wall. So in conclusion, from a Jungian perspective, Plato's cave can be seen as a metaphor for the human condition. We are all prisoners of our own minds, limited by our projections and perceptions. And the journey towards wholeness and integration requires us to recognize these limitations and strive towards the realization of the self, to become aware of one's inner world and the forces that create the shadows on the wall, the archetypes, complexes, and other parts of us. And the object of Plato, according to Thomas Taylor, is to present to us the fact that there are in the soul certain ideas or principles which are innate and not derived from without, but are anterior to all experience, and are developed and brought to view, but not produced by experience. And these ideas are the most vital of all truths, and the purpose of instruction and discipline is to make the individual conscious of them and willing to be led and inspired by them. And a lot of Plato's understanding is, next to his allegory of the cave, also present in his ideas regarding the soul. This is divided in the logistikon, timos, and epitumetikon, which can be seen as the ego, anima animus, and shadow from a Jungian lens. And for Plato, it was the task of the individual to bring these three aspects of the soul into harmony where they don't interfere with each other. Firstly, the epitumetikon is associated with our desires for things like food, drink, sex, and material possessions. It is the part of the soul that drives us to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. It is closely related to the body and its needs, and it is often seen as the least noble or rational part of the soul. and according to Plato, the epithemetikon is the most easily influenced and manipulated part of the soul, and it is often at odds with the rational and moral parts of the soul. And from a Jungian perspective, the epithemetikon can be seen as representing the instinctual, primal, and unconscious aspects of the psyche, which is also associated with the collective unconscious. And Jung believed that the instincts were an essential part of the human psyche, and that they could not be ignored or repressed without negative consequences. However, he also recognized the need to bring them into balance and harmony with the other parts of the psyche. Another important aspect that is often equated with epithemetikon by some is eros. However, to Plato, eros is not just a desire for physical beauty or pleasure, but a desire for the beauty that is found in the world of forms. And this desire is awakened in us when we encounter beautiful things in the physical world, such as beautiful people, works of art, or natural scenery. However, this desire is not satisfied by these physical things themselves, but by the forms of beauty that they participate in. Eros is also closely linked to the idea of love in Plato's philosophy. In the Symposium, one of Plato's dialogues, several characters give speeches about the nature of love, and they describe Eros as a force that drives human beings to seek out their other half or soulmate, where thumos, which is above the epithemetikon within Plato's system, is often translated as spiritedness or emotional energy, and it is often associated with our emotional and motivational responses to the world around us. And thumos is different from the desiring part of the soul, which is responsible for our physical appetites and desires. Instead, thumos is concerned with our emotional responses to situations that we encounter in the world, such as anger, courage, pride, and shame. And according to Plato, thumos is the part of the soul that drives us to defend our honor and dignity, to seek out recognition and respect from others, and to stand up for what we believe in. And it is also the source of our emotional responses to music, poetry, and other forms of art. The thumos, with its emotional and motivational responses, could be seen as representing a part of the animus in women or the anima in men, while eros, with its desire for beauty and connection, could also represent a part of the anima and the animus, where finally the logistikon is associated with our capacity for reason, logic, and critical thinking. And he places this above both the epithemetikon and thumos, and it is responsible for our ability to engage in rational thought, make decisions based on moral principles, and exercise self-control. And it is the part of the soul that is capable of contemplating the eternal and unchanging forms. And it is the source of our understanding of abstract concepts. And from a Jungian perspective, the logistikon could be seen as representing logic and rational thought, which is associated with the conscious mind. Thumos and eros, on the other hand, could be seen as representing the anima and animus, which are archetypes of the collective unconscious that represent the feminine and masculine aspects of the psyche. And what is key for Plato is that these forces are balanced, also depicted in the chariot, that you can see here as well, with the soul and logos really trying to balance both.